Hey, I'm going to be so for real. I get I haven't made a proper Deltarune video before. Actually, I haven't made a proper video on a video game with this channel before. I mean, unless you count the shorts. But still, this is very much a video for people somewhat in the know when it comes to the games Undertale and Deltarune. This video's intro almost went into explaining what the fuck a Tobias Foxtrot is. But really, if you don't know what even a Gaster is, I mean, I wouldn't blame you, but still, this just doesn't happen to be the video for you, because these are two games with very large and complex worlds with a relation to one another that's like no other. Next video will be a bit more anybody can watch, I promise. Starting off with the end of chapter 2, obviously the next chapter's Dark World is taking place in Toriel's house, and not to immediately distract myself, but I've seen people discuss why Chris made the Dark Fountain, with some people thinking that they're the Knight. While I've got my own opinions on the Knight that I'll save for later, I'll say for now that I don't think it's Chris. Chris is clearly going through a lot right now, and this seems like the best way for Chris to do what any kid would do when going through an impossible situation, which is ask their mom for help. It makes even more sense after the weird route. After all, Chris was forced to do all those terrible things. Of course they're going to take the nuclear option to try and get help. This action also cements, in my eyes anyway, that the player is the main antagonist of Deltarune, but we'll get more into that later. For now, let's guess some good old-fashioned Dark Worlds. There's plenty of potential places, from the bunker to Asgore's house, to the diner, to the hospital. I think I want to stick with potential Dark Worlds that could easily prove themselves as being vital to the character arcs of Deltarune's key characters. With that in mind, the characters I think will be key going forward are going to be the Dreamer family, the Holiday family, specifically Des Holiday, Susie, Ralsei, Caddy, Jockington, and of course Gaster. Though I will admit there's a bunch of characters that might be key characters too, but it's just kind of hard for me to see that actually being the case. Such characters include Burger Pants, Undyne, Alphys, Alvin, maybe a parent of Susie's, as well as Sans and Papyrus. To add on to specifically the massive can of skeleworms that is Sans, as much as I would kind of love a Sans lore dump, where it's confirmed that he's from Undertale and Gaster is his dad or some shit, I just have this feeling that he's just kind of here to be a silly little guy. Same with Papyrus. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear from him until like chapter 7, and maybe he just pops his head around a corner to say something like, "I am quite fond of spaghetti, and then they're like, that's it. So with that in mind, I think chapter 4 will be the diner. This is in order to bring Caddy and Jockington along, or at the very least Caddy. To be honest, I could totally see Jockington getting some Caddy equivalent to Snowgrave. So while I'm sure he'll have some role, it might not be the most, alive role. There is also a very large part of me that wants to see Caddy use Jockington as a weapon. But either way, I just get the vibe from Caddy that there's a chance she could end up as part of the fun gang. Which is why the earlier she gets incorporated into the team, the better. Which is why I'm thinking chapter 4. And I'm saying the diner because it seems like a fun place for a Dark World, and also that's where she works. Chapter 5 I think will be Asgore's chapter, which can really be either in the police station, his old workplace, or his flower shop / house. Personally, I'm thinking it's going to be Asgore's place. If there was going to be a police station in the Dark World, I feel like that would have to include Undyne, and that just doesn't feel right to me. Besides the Dreamers, most of the Undertale cast in Deltarune seem to just be there for slight assisting roles in the Light World. After all, why develop a whole new gag character or a whole new shopkeep when you can just use Burger Pants and Sans? Sort of like what Nomura did with the Final Fantasy characters in Kingdom Hearts, if you happen to also have that flavor of brain rot. Though one point in favor of the police station is that it could be used, metaphorically. Say Asgore thinks of himself as maybe a villain who would belong in such a place, which lines up with how he is in Undertale. Plus, it's implied that Asgore did something bad. It's hard to tell what exactly he did, just that it got him fired and probably also divorced. Considering the Light World doesn't seem to be exactly abundant with crime, I think whatever Asgore did might also tie in with Des Holiday going missing. Like he assaulted a suspect behind the disappearance. The big issue with this line of thinking, though, is the only character I could see Asgore having attacked is Rudy, of all people. I know he says he's in the hospital because he's sick, but he's very vague about his illness, and Rudy absolutely seems like the kind of guy to lie about something like that. After all, it'd be distressing as hell for a kid to know that the nice flower guy could ever do such a thing, so it's arguably the right thing to do in a situation, especially considering that Chris is Asgore's kid and also one of Noelle's only friends. Though this doesn't mean I think Rudy actually kidnapped Des or anything like that, just that Asgore got suspicious and during a questioning his anger got the best of him or something like that. Though in chapter 2 he mentions needing more tests, and who knows, maybe by tests he means surgery or something, though there's also the chance that he got actual sick because of the injury, something got infected or something. Again, I'm not the strongest believer in this, but I feel like Rudy's hospitalization will have a big impact on the story, but the idea of that impact being just him dying never sat right with me. There is also the chance that maybe Asgore and Rudy went into the bunker in order to look for Des, but something in there happened. Like, for example, Rudy fell into a vat of weird goo and that got him sick, and Asgore feels bad for not being able to protect Rudy. Still, whatever Asgore did will probably be the focus of chapter 5, and that'll probably be in the flower shop, where the fun gang have to go save Asgore from a Godry 2 or some shit. During chapter 5, there's probably going to be a new revelation about Des, which might lead to everyone gearing up to prepare for the chapter 6's Dark World, The Bunker. I think this is absolutely going to be the Des holiday chapter, and will lead to more overt references to Gaster in the story. After all, a slowed version of his theme plays when you get near the bunker door. I think there's also a chance that Des, through probably some technology found in the bunker, will be returned to the light world from the weird code world she's in right now, though she might not be the only one who returns, since there's also whoever the fuck wrote that Valentine's letter, since there's not enough Gasterisms for it to be, Gaster. Other than that, I ain't got the slightest of who's actually in the bunker, besides that music that Onion-san keeps hearing, because I guess the bunker is just that big. I also think this chapter could have a big focus on Ralsei, mostly just guessing this on the fact that I think both Ralsei and this bunker have something to do with Deltarune's meta-narrative, though that's something I'd like to explore more later. Next up is chapter 7, which I think that due to the roaring, the whole place will be a mix between the light world and the dark world. I think there's a chance that some smaller buildings such as ICs and the church could get like dark world elements, like maybe an IC's boss or a temporarily reincarnated Gerson due to the graveyard, though I'd imagine most of the chapter will be focused on the festival in the woods. I got more opinions on chapter 7, but I also want to take the time to guess about Chris, Susie, and the soul that controls Chris, which I'll just refer to as the controller soul or CS. So I think the goal of whoever gave the player the CS is to give them an enjoyable video game. I think whoever's behind the CS, maybe, probably, definitely, Gaster, is doing an experiment with Deltarune's reality. I think that experiment involves giving us, the player, a story with the Dark Worlds being pushed into Deltarune's reality in order to make the game seem more interesting, maybe to keep us hooked. The longer the player stays, the more Gaster gets out of it, something like that. No real solid physical evidence for that right now, just it seems Gaster is here to make Deltarune interesting to the player, and I doubt he's here to make a quick buck. This then begs the question, why was Chris chosen as the protagonist, as the bearer of the CS? It's interesting, because Chris has to overcome the influence of the CS in order to become more relevant to the plot, as best seen in the ending of chapter 2, which implies that Chris being this relevant to the plot is unintended. There is also the weird route, but this is almost definitely not something that Gaster intended for the player to do with Chris. After all, it was buried behind secret after secret, so again, why is Chris the protagonist? Simple. Chris isn't the intended protagonist. Chris is just the person that got unlucky. I feel like whatever Chris and Des were doing before Des appeared is that they were messing about, probably in the bunker since it's been implied that Chris has been there before. Whatever happened in there led to Des going AWOL and Chris getting the CS, though arguably not as powerful as it is when we see it in Deltarune, which is why we start playing Deltarune way after all this went down. So if Chris wasn't who Gaster intended on being Deltarune's protagonist, then who was? Who is the most like a protagonist we see in the game? Simple. It's Susie. She's simply just stronger than Chris. Like literally, look at her stats. All of them are consistently higher than Chris's. She also has the potential to learn healing magic, where it at least has yet to be implied that Chris can. She's so far the only character that the CS has shown to take direct control over, though only for brief periods of time, and it is the same one. In the Lancer fight, you can see it coming down from where Chris is, like it's already starting to slowly take over Susie, ready in order to make the total switch from Chris to Susie, which is something we'll probably see happen in late chapter 6 or early chapter 7. In keeping with talking about the CS, I want to talk about Ralsei, because he clearly wants to keep making Susie happy, and he's the one who taught Susie healing magic. My take on Ralsei and Castletown is that Gaster used the soul of Chris, as that at the time was the only soul he had a connection to, and it was through Chris's soul he made Castletown. If Chris thought Asriel someone likable, it makes sense that Ralsei, someone made to be a likable party member by Gaster, resembles him. Perhaps it's this connection that Castletown has with the souls of others that explains why Ralsei is able to make those runes so fast, and why it's clearly different from the other Dark Worlds. Maybe, though I don't necessarily know if that makes Ralsei evil. It could totally happen that Ralsei doesn't fully understand what they're doing, or that what they're doing is wrong, and personally I'd rather a scene where Ralsei essentially betrays Gaster and joins the fun gang for real, rather than Ralsei going full villain mode. Speaking of Ralsei, I should also briefly touch on his anagram Asriel. I think he's still alive, and I think that when he does come home, he might also have info on something that could either be helpful to Chris or Des. Most likely Des. Like he went to college to go and study some occulting that could help. Perhaps he's even what provokes the fun gang to go into the bunker, rather than finding out some truth in Asgore's Dark World. With all that done and said, I guess it's about time I start talking about who the knight is. Personally, my guess is actually Des, and also sort of Gaster. Hear me out. Every good story needs a protagonist and an antagonist. Bold statement, I know. So Gaster takes two kids in his little bunker domain, Chris and Des, and decides to make one a temporary protagonist. After all, being in the same class, Chris and Susie were more likely to interact than Susie and Des were, which left Des the role of the villain. Though who knows what Des looks like now after being in cyberspace for so long. Maybe they've gone full masked man from Mother 3, maybe they're even the person who wrote the Valentine's note. Either way, Gaster is able to take Des in and out of the light world at will, and Des just sort of has to follow Gaster's orders, because like Chris, they have a CS. Though this one might be controlled directly by Gaster. Though that's a stupidly bold claim, I'm aware. Again, swinging for the fences. Won't feel good if all my predictions are just like, oh, I think a roar's gonna happen, unless it doesn't. Still, it makes sense that Chris and Des would end up in a similar situation given whatever that shared event was, and maybe if Des gets freed from their CS in Chapter 6, it'll tell Chris and the gang how to free Susie's of hers in Chapter 7. Which brings me to my last guess. Who is the final boss of Deltarune? Now, it might seem kind of obvious based on what I've been talking about, but I think the final boss of Deltarune is going to be Chris. Makes the most sense in my eyes. After all, in the actual game of Deltarune, not Gaster's weird meta version of Deltarune, Chris is the protagonist, and us, the players, are the antagonist. We're the ones causing the direct conflict in Chris's life, so really, who else would be in the final conflict except us, puppeting Chris's friend against Chris themselves? Though, since I mentioned the whole stats thing, maybe Chris gets a boost of power once they're free of the CS, or maybe Chris and Susie's friends help out in the final fight, like they're trying to save Susie. I also think the distinction between Susie and the CS will be made clear to everyone by the end of things, so it's less of a fight against Susie and more of a fight between Susie's friends and the CS, with it being a fight between freedom and control. Perhaps this is where the weird route comes into play, with that influencing which side people take in the final fight. Maybe if you do Snowgrave, Noelle will help the CS, or maybe it'll make her stupid hard to defeat when fighting against her in the final fight. As for what happens after the final fight, I don't really know. I've seen some people guess that Deltarune is going to end with like everyone dying or in a time loop, but personally I like to imagine Gaster giving the player one last peek into the world of Deltarune, no CS, just the computer screen, looking over the futures of all our favorite characters as the credits roll. Even if I turn out to be the biggest fool this town has ever done dead seen, I still feel like my predictions tie into what seem to be a lot of Deltarune's bigger themes, because this game do be ruminating on free will and friendship with a meta-narrative about the role of the player as a sort of enemy of the player character though. But who knows? Honestly, I'll be happy to be found out is wrong, cause it'll be more Deltarune chapters are out. And like, I clearly like Deltarune. Do you see how long this video is? That also means that if any of you guys have a few predictions of your own, please let me know in the comments below. And maybe do a little subscribing while you're at it. I've never quite written a script like this, but I really did try my best, so notes of any kind are appreciated. And with that, my name is Robin, this is Spellbound Media, see ya.